You're on the right place. You've checked in.
You're online. You're online, Kyle. Please start.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Lakat. Welcome back to another edition of VC TV. We're excited to have you. We were just wrapping up a great pre-show conversation and now ready to share with you, our audience. Thank you again for tuning in. Really appreciate it. As we do here on every episode of VC TV, we talk about what is happening in various technologies, industries, and regions around the world, where they are intersecting, where the trends, where the opportunities are to make sure you as founders have the best position for success, and you as investors know where to place your bets and have the most education for everybody on what's happening in global and micro markets today. It's Tuesday. I haven't had enough coffee. I will get back to this. Here we go. With that being said, a continuous theme that we've had every day, every day that we've had here on VC TV is around data and how data is powering everything we do. It's not the new electricity, as we'll hear about artificial intelligence, but data does sit at the base of everything we do, powers it, drives it forward, and changes it for the better and sometimes for the new. We're going to dive into what that means as we talk today about machine learning, data, blockchain, deep technologies, and everything that is pushing data forward into our lives and how that is going to affect us going forward, what's happening in the investment space, and then also what are some of the new use cases that are starting to rise up in trends following the last 6 months as we look ahead towards the next year ahead. Now, audience, thank you again for joining us. Make sure you click the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up if you like today's conversation. I guarantee you will. It's going to be a good one. And a big shout out to Elena and to the entire LATOKEN team for bringing us together and bringing VC TV to your screen everywhere around the world. Now, let's get to our panelists, the individuals who are going to be sharing their knowledge and insights with all of us. And as we mentioned here on all episodes of VC TV, we're all available online. Feel free to reach out to us. But if you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll do my best to get it asked during the conversation. If not, again, feel free to reach out to us afterwards, and we will definitely follow up. First and foremost, Ed TV style or Brady Bunch style for those, depending on your age range. Let's get kicked off with Marcus. Marcus, welcome to the show. If you can, a little introduction and background on yourself.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you to the entire crew for putting this together. So I'm excited to be here. It is the first time for me in this new virtual setting, although I have been there a few times around in actual person. So my name is Marcus Lampinen. I am a serial entrepreneur. I worked in sectors such as distribution rights with piracy networks and streaming services, fintech, and now I focused a lot more on data. Like Kyle, you said, it is a fantastic topic. I will say that I am also an investor through a group of serial entrepreneurs where we get to work with brilliant founders in different types of applications. So for example, myself, I'm invested in an auto ML platform called EasyML. And I'm, for example, right now as an operator running a company called Perfina. I will say that as one line, which is like closest to me, running Perfina, then basically we have this this platform where we've allowed individuals to centralize their data into their own personal clouds, and then developers to build on top of these. And Kyle, you mentioned use cases. So I've been working in the last year with over 15,000 software developers that have hacked together various different types of applications. And I would say that as a prelude, the things that I've found the most fascinating is when you take really, really rich data sources, especially on an individual level, and then you apply some revolutionary technology to that. Like, for example, ML, but also software robotics, or then some type of intelligence. I hesitate to say AI, but some type of agency software for the individual. So that's me in a short snippet.
I love it. And we're definitely going to get into some of those. And I want to talk further on some of those use cases, because I think a lot of times we hear the word ML or the phrase ML or machine learning, and it gets very muddy around data and artificial intelligence, and just all of it gets packaged into one. So really excited to understand what is machine learning at its core for each and every one of you. So we'll come back around to that and also talk about some of these underlying technologies. So Marcus, you kicked us off with AI, but I know Gary and a few others will talk about AI and blockchain. We'll come back to fintech as well, because these technologies do play a role in this as well. So a lot to unpack in today's episode. Petros, welcome to the show as well in your beautiful London setting, as the sun looks like it's coming down over there. But if you can, a little intro and background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for organizing, Elena and Kyle. Great to be here. So I'm Petros, as the background suggests. I'm based in London, and I head the European operations of Vickers Venture Partners. We're a global venture capital firm. We invest in deep tech around the globe. So we specifically, so we're a bit unusual in terms of we don't focus on a specific area or in a specific geography, but we focus more on, we try and find breakthrough innovations wherever they may occur. So things that will completely change an existing industry. And so we've sort of spread around the world, trying to find companies like that. Myself, my background is I was a data scientist before I joined Vickers. So I was working here at Deloitte, advising companies on AI and strategy. So yeah, so that sort of feeds into a lot of what we invest in terms of we like geeky, technically difficult things that are trying to change the world, really, and we like to get our hands dirty with on the technical side.
So you come from the technical background, so you're going to have some technical expertise for us today.
Well, hopefully, let's see.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely geek out a little bit more today. We've talked a lot about singularity. We've talked about flying cars. We've talked about the future of robotics aside from the Terminator. So we'll definitely have some fun on the geeking outside today. Welcome, Petros. Justin, my man, welcome back to the show. 2 days in a row. We've got another guest the same. It's good to see you. A little intro and background for those who were not able to tune in with us yesterday as we talked about artificial intelligence and kind of teased into this subject on yesterday's episode.
Sure. Thanks, Kyle. Great to be back. Yeah, so Justin Clapper, a bit of a unique background for me. Before I got into investing, spent about 10 years in the Navy, 6 as a Navy SEAL, and I'm at Columbia Business School now, and I'm at Charge Ventures. We're an early stage investing fund in New York City, so we focus on primarily data-driven companies. I mean, we're generalists, but we look for companies that are using data to drive a wedge into, and technology to drive a wedge into different verticals and kind of create new opportunities. And so just like the panel yesterday, looking forward to discussing kind of where that lies in the future ahead. Thanks.
Wonderful, and excited to have you back again. It was good conversation yesterday. I know it's going to continue. Steve, welcome to the show. I know you've got a little bit of background, slightly different than ML, but it plays a very unique role, again, at that deep technology level, which we're continuing to have here as a common thread and theme on VCTV. That's very important, as it's an infrastructural change to a lot what we're doing, and is going to set a very exciting course, hopefully, for the next decade ahead. If you can, a little intro and a little background on yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Kyle. Hello, folks. A pleasure to be here. Thank you again, Yelena and the LATOKEN team. Yeah, so I, Stephen Kelso, I'm head of markets at ITI Capital. ITI is an emerging market focused multi-asset prime broker. And I'll come into our focus on machine learning. Obviously, it's really twofold. Directly, obviously, through actual trading strategies, and obviously we've seen one of the first earliest adopted use cases, of course, ML for navigating financial markets. But also probably more relevant for investors is ITI has really evolved as an emerging market player. So as the globalization trade evolved, away from, shall we say, natural resources, which was where the main thrust of emerging market investment came just after the GFC 12 years ago. Obviously, over the second part of that post-GFC recovery, we saw much more focus on tech, big tech. Dynamics really much more driven by the US consumer. And that's really what ITI does at its heart. Our USP over other emerging market players is very much more that sort of forward look into technology and investment cases around that for our sort of emerging market client base. So before ITI Capital, I set up and ran Galaxy Digital's business in Europe. Again, you know, obviously with a big focus on trading digital assets. So naturally for me, I am very focused on that nexus really between, you know, digital assets, cryptocurrencies, of course, but also the digitalization of fiat currencies and how the world's evolving there. So obviously in this post-great Corona recession recovery, you know, I can see the acceleration of all these dynamics. So thank you.
Awesome. I am very excited to dive into that, but we'll come back and welcome Steve to the show. Excited to have you. Gary, the Grandmaster. AI is the new electricity, the one and only Gary Fowler. Welcome back to the show. I believe this is 4 days in a row. This is a new record here on VCTV. You're about to trump Elena and I, but you're an absolutely outstanding guest and perfect for today's topic as I tease. Welcome back to the show. A little intro and background.
I'm humbled, Kyle. I'm not sure if I live up to that, but anyhow, my name's Gary Fowler, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been doing startups a long time, over 30 years. I did my first startup at 21. My biggest exit was a Click Software in August of last year. I was on the original team. We sold it for a little over $1 billion to Salesforce. I love AI. I started one of the top 10 AI HR companies with a billionaire out of Russia, David Yang. I lived in Russia on and off for 14 years. So I wanted to see what it was like in that part of the world. And so I wanted to see how could we use data scientists, AI, algorithmic mathematicians to create incredible companies. So today I'm the CEO and co-founder of GSD, Get Shit Done Venture Studios. And I got that from the back of Mark Zuckerberg's desk. It says, Get Shit Done. I thought that's a company name. You know, it all says it in one. So what we do is we help growth stage companies go global in AI. So I'm looking for the most resilient teams, the most incredible companies that have traction, some traction that want to go global, because I don't believe that opportunity is really equally distributed around the world. And so we're looking for intergenerational, multicultural, regionally diverse teams. And I believe now's the time with the digital transformation, more than ever, to be able to take that kind of a method and methodology and drive companies forward to be able to bring them to market faster and more efficiently.
Wonderful. And again, welcome back to the show. And
thank you,
I
Kyle.
see, yeah, absolutely. And Alpha, I see you shaking your head down there. Welcome to the show as well. I think you're agreeing with the digitization. Maybe we'll change the name. We'll just call it digitization. We're not talking just about ML today, but welcome to the show. A little intro and background on yourself.
So it's amazing, you know, all the things the guys are saying, I resonate with. I'm an entrepreneur, been building business for about 20 years. I've worked in the data AI space for over 10 years, been through the cycle of the big data thing that happened. So this new phrase that people are talking about, data is the new oil. I didn't come up with it. I copied it from a guy called Gert Leonhardt. He said that in 2009, and I put that in my presentation in 2010. So it's come around again. So it's quite interesting. But we're a venture studio consulting firm. We've been building big data platforms for companies for 10 years and work in the blockchain space for about 5 years. We now have a venture called Kendra Labs, which is a data AI platform. One of the biggest challenges with all of the data issues is most companies don't have a data fabric, a data layer in their companies. It's really hard for them to build it. They don't have the skills or the expertise to do it. Things like data lakes, frankly, have failed. You know, the nirvana was get a data lake and it'll work. We don't believe that. I'm a technologist and an architect by background. And, you know, what we're seeing in all the clients and the prospects we're working with is taking a different lens, which is providing that data layer across a business. Greylock Partners called it systems of intelligence. I don't know if you guys have read the article. It's called The New Moats, and Greylock Partners called it systems of intelligence back in 2017. So that's what we're delivering. We're using an open source platform that Intel created about 3 or 4 years ago, which we've taken on as an open source project to help provide that as a consumption-based SaaS service on AWS. And then we also have an integration layer which connects to hundreds of different applications like Salesforce and SAP out of the box, again on a consumption basis. So what we're trying to do is, with multiple vertical markets like in pharma, in media, in healthcare, in financial services, provide that data layer for companies. And it's gone utter crazy. It's crazy at the moment. The story seems to be resonating with our clients and our prospects. So I'm finally, it's, people are not just saying, just build me a data lake. They're actually getting, this isn't about building data lakes. It's about transforming thinking about how data is going to transform their business, and actually taking a strategic business perspective rather than a technology perspective. So for us, it's really exciting because we're resonating with lots of clients around that approach.
And for you, it sounds like this is a booming because of potentially the last 12 months. I mean, looking ahead, is this, when you're talking to clients or you're talking to industry, what is the new importance or the new recognition of data and what that means to them?
So it's 10 years ago, people said big data, you should talk about data in your business. The reality is most companies haven't done anything about it. So it's that, for whatever reason, digital transformation, obviously what's happening, COVID, obviously, but more than that, actually people are thinking more strategically about data and saying, we need to figure this out, and investing in it. That's the difference. It's not come from the CIO saying, we'll build you a Hadoop data lake. It's coming from the business saying, we need to figure out how we're going to use data across our business. So that's the shift. The shift is strategic thinking around data is going to change the business. That's the thinking. And shifting away from technology to how do we transform our operating model, our business model around data. So we can hopefully, when we talk through this, I can give some examples of real things that we're working on.
I'm just about to ask Marcus that, so I'll start with you. You're unmuted. So Alfish, what's a use case? What are you seeing as a use case or example of that? And Marcus, I'm going to come to you next on some more use cases as well, because I'll say this, sorry, real quick, Alfish. A lot of people talk about data, as you said, talk about big data, talk about digital transformation, and you know what? It's all talk.
It's all big.
So where is this? Yeah, where is this actually being applied? So yeah, please share some use cases.
I'm just trying to think of which example to discuss. So in healthcare, let's take healthcare and pharma. Literally, the reason I was late is I was on a call with a client, and I had to cut halfway through. Our CTO still on the call around. So they're looking at patient data. It's around collecting data for patients, for 5 million patients in the UK, to be able to then offer that as a platform approach to research companies, pharmaceutical companies. So that they need a data layer to be able to pull our data in, organize it, manage it, provide it as a platform approach to offer that to the industry to be able to what's called early disease detection. That's real. They've raised 80 million to do this, and it's a non-profit body, and they're going to raise a total of 250 million.
And that's actually process and mine and understand the data to then make decisions based on it.
No, this is specifically about collecting data from individuals, organizing that, and then offering that to the industry to be able to do early disease detection. So for example, if you could detect cancer early, you save a hell of a lot of pain, but also time and budget, and obviously mortality is obviously an issue. So this project is a 5-year program of work where that's what they're doing, and so I take an architecture approach that, with the conversation we were just having, was around, okay, how do you build a proper data architecture and operating model to do this? Because we already have the platform, obviously we're talking about providing that as our platform as the service to do that. So one of the key challenges is, how do you avoid building bespoke solutions? So this is one of the biggest challenges for us in terms of our business. Is we don't want to build bespoke solutions. This is about providing a platform approach with components that people can leverage off and scale with. So very simple example, if you're going to integrate to SAP and pull all the data from SAP, right now you have to build all that yourself. What we're going towards saying, you don't have to build it. We've got the integrations, we've got the data platform, provision it by just going, I'm simplifying it, provision and go on a website and go click, can we have the provisioning to pull SAP data into the data layer and expose it to apps? So that's where we're going towards, is to basically reduce the cost and the complexity of actually using data in their business. And that's one of the biggest challenges right now. Most of this stuff is, I've got some tech, even AWS says, I've got tech, I can do big data. Well, the problem is, no, you can't, you have to build it. We're now taking to the next step and saying, you don't have to build it, you just have to provision it. Here you go. So
you're essentially removing that block. And it sounds like, Marcus, this is something that you've seen in your efforts as well, and would love to hear some of those use cases you've worked on in this space also. And Steve, I see you shaking your head. I see you agreeing. I'm going to come to you around blockchain and how this fits into that picture as well, and digital assets. So get ready. Get your thoughts ready, everybody. Marcus, go ahead.
Awesome. So first of all, to all the panelists, I mean, awesome thoughts as we're going through this. I think that there's so much expertise and perspective on this panel that's fantastic. My perspective is slightly different in terms of where I'm coming from, because I'm kind of looking at this world from like how I see it changing in the future. Like I see that right now, after some changes in the last couple of years, individuals now actually have a lot of access to their own data. So my focus is very much on the data about the individuals. You can call it personal data, so on and so forth. Like, for example, if Kyle were to download his Facebook data, then he's got 2.4 million lines of data that just comes out of Facebook. So my starting point is that in my role as the CEO of Profina and my operator role, I mean, basically we're an open source company that provides this framework for individuals to bring this data in an automated fashion, but then for developers to build on top of this. So we're a developer tools company at the end of the day. And I kind of look at it from two very competing realities. One of those is some of my co-founders have backgrounds in running, our CTOs ran 4 data companies, for example, over the past 20 years. And I've been digging through a lot of companies' data, so very, very innovative companies' data about me. And I've just come to the realization that most companies' data just sucks. Like it's just absolutely deficient and it's absolutely incorrect. Like many people, many companies, they'll have gender marked as both male and female, because it's just a lot easier to sell populated fields as opposed to empty ones if you don't know. But then there are, of course, platforms that do have a lot of data. But coming back to the use cases, then from that point of view, my starting point is oftentimes that, well, I mean, most of the time it is that if the individual were able to centralize all of this data, so take Facebook, take LinkedIn, take Google, take location, take payments, ancestry data, genetics, whatnot, then the question I ask these developers is, what would you build on top of that? And then you get basically an open market. And that's one of the coolest things that I see going forward, that if we can democratize that access to data via the individual as basically a proxy in between, because at the end of the day, personal data is the individuals, then we can come up with some really, really amazing applications, but also some really, really crazy ones. Because the reality is that if you can actually mix these data sources, like I'll just give you an example that 3 weeks ago, I had a developer that came to me and said that, hey, I've hacked together this really cool use case where you can generate a playlist on Spotify based on your heart rate. And I just kind of listened to that and I thought, I have no idea. Like, look, I've got no words. Like you take beats per minute from your heart and you match it to a tempo, but then the point is that, that data isn't really available. So you can't really mix and match that data today. I mean, you would have to go to Spotify and interact with their API unless you could actually go to the individual. So those things I really like. I also like this idea that can we give the individual themselves even more intelligence and even more advocacy in these interactions? Like, for example, could you take ML and create certain type of predictions based on the individual's habits? And then create, for example, like lifestyle recommendations. It's not really my business to create these apps. Like that's where we have this open collaboration with an open developer community. But at the same time, there was, for example, an ML engineer that came to us about a couple of weeks ago for creating an app based on activity. So steps and sleep patterns for figuring out what is the optimal time for his parents to take their medication. So that's kind of one of these things that I'm not an expert in that. But I find those applications really fascinating just to kind of think about how a historically very, very B2B centered marketplace, how it could not necessarily flip on its head, but how it could become, how we could create almost like this parallel universe or we can have individuals also have data apps. Because most of these applications, like for example, talking about data lakes, and in my past company where I worked with fintech platforms, for example, with banks, I mean, that's a very, very true reality. But then oftentimes, I mean, it's not just the data that you have, it's how you use it and all those tools and all of that. But at the same time, most of these platforms, I mean, just starting from the data that they've got, it is either very, very deep in one certain vertical, or then even that data is, somehow, let's say, somehow crooked. So you have to kind of start from there. But I really, like I said in my intro, I really love these applications that if you can give developers more data, richer data, but then also at the same time tools like, for example, ML, and then, for example, software robotics, or if different types of intelligent software, then I think they will blow us away with what they actually come up with. And especially when we think about new markets, for example, I think anything that we're seeing, especially on the personal data side, it is the early innings, that the early apps that we get, they're not going to be anything like the ones that we'll have, let's say, as different types of markets emerge a little bit further.
Mm-hmm. And I absolutely agree. I mean, having a background in the Internet of Things and technology for many years, I've heard the promise of data and data in our lives and data powering things from wearables to connected devices to our cities. And look, I paint that picture. I think it's a very future forward picture, and it's going to come at some point. But you're right, data is, those early applications are still first inning, they're early. What's to come will be there, but the question is when. Data is skewed still in many places. We had a previous episode, we talked about the shifting of marketplaces in e-commerce and how we have this boom of data that has just happened in the past 6 months around e-commerce and marketplaces. But the data is skewed because not everybody has access to be able to do online shopping, for instance. And those who do, where are they based? And it just gives a very skewed side of one data point that you can't make full decisions on, and you have to adjust for those. So it's going to be interesting to see how data, and Petros, I see you, I'm coming to you, how that data gets adjusted for. And also, as we know, data is perishable, right? Historical data is good for some areas, as Elfish just mentioned, but also it has a time limit in some cases as well, may not be applicable in the future. So Petros, I want to come to you, and then Justin, Steve, and Gary, I'm coming to you next. So Petros.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, really interesting perspectives, and just wanted to add maybe a bit more of a positive story as well to this. So when it comes to data, I agree, it's really important, and when we're talking about AI and machine learning, that is fundamentally where the predictability is coming from when in this kind of companies. And until recently, you would see a lot of in the healthcare space where it's notoriously difficult. Data is the bottleneck there, and you're seeing various problems now with COVID-19 that's attributed to all these data silos that exist all over the place, and the inability of the healthcare system to work with each other because of these data silos. And despite the potential of AI and machine learning in healthcare space, it's the bottleneck has been data. How do you create this data? And until today, a company would have, a lot of companies had a competitive advantage that built amazing tools just because they were able to access data from 2 or 3 hospitals. But increasingly, what I'm starting to notice is this data is becoming more and more commoditized. Healthcare systems are coming to the realization that data is an asset, is a monetized asset, whether they're going to monetize it in terms of selling it, selling access to it, or they're going to monetize it by providing it so that someone can build really interesting tools to them that will be shared among other. And so you're seeing quite, I feel this becoming very active, where there's companies and there's institutions that are really building systems where they can share data, they can share this health data, they're coming around all this barriers that would have stopped them traditionally sharing these data sets. So just wanted to add that sort of positive spin from healthcare, because yeah, you're right, in consumer tech it's difficult because there's so many stakeholders, but we are seeing that trend in healthcare.
Well, and not even just healthcare, in many sectors as well, right? Where people are starting to open up. You're bringing up a very interesting trend where people are starting to open up and share data in different ways, whether it be anonymized, hopefully, or just in different openness where people can opt in to share that data, which is leading to some of those products that Marcus and then also that kind of fall and challenges as Elfish mentioned. Allowing for these new applications, allowing for these new models to be created as well. And Justin, would love to come to you on this and see, are you feeling or seeing the same types of things as well and what you're doing at Charge, and then just in general with your background? I mean, are you seeing this openness of data, this rise of additional use cases or new marketplaces that are coming to because of the openness of data?
Yeah, well, so yes, to answer the questions in sequence, yes. At Charge, we are seeing this, and I think that, so to Marcus's point about the issues with labeling, I think that as, the convergence of natural language processing and people who are, people are willing to buy it, people are willing to sell it, right? So you have people that are hawking databases that look good, and then you dig a little bit deeper and things are, mislabeled, and, labeling is going to continue to be a huge problem in databases. And I think that there's some really interesting research being done with metadata that just completely kind of moves past HIPAA compliance and data privacy issues that are really, really important. And I'll come back to that. But drawing on my own personal background as a former Department of Defense person, I wanted to kind of go back to like 3 stories, which I think are kind of fun data stories, because people, data I think is like, because for me, I have to like kind of think this way, because, you guys are much more experienced with this, but when, hopefully people who are watching kind of get a sense of this, people like with Tesla and these like kind of autonomous vehicles get, it's like kind of magic that it works. But I think it's easy to forget, like in 2004, in the DARPA Grand Challenge, so DARPA Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is the same place, ARPA, DARPA, where the internet came from way back during the Cold War. But in 2004, they did the DARPA Grand Challenge to try out in the Mojave Desert to try and get vehicles to drive themselves, right? And the course is around 130 miles. And none of the vehicles finished. The farthest vehicle got 7 miles. It got hung up on a rock, right? And so they canceled it, redid it the next year, and 5 vehicles finished, and every single one made it past that initial. So there's just like this compounding, and you could attribute it to sensor growth, you could attribute it to data kind of sensors. There's another interesting DARPA story that happened in 2009, which I think is also kind of fun and interesting, that talks about the kind of power of kind of distributed networks and opens like more hopeful, and the capacity of data to kind of solve like problems. And it's the story. So in the 40th anniversary of the internet, DARPA did this project with MIT to locate these 10 weather balloons. They hit these bright red weather balloons across the United States, and they said go. And these teams, not just MIT, but all these teams across the U.S. had to identify where these weather balloons were, and that was it. That was the challenge. You had to just bet, and the winner got all the balloons the fastest. That was the winner. And so MIT did it in 7 hours using collaborative data science. They put like an awards page up, using the internet. They said, hey, if you see a weather balloon, you can claim a prize, and they bought some paid advertising on Google. They used data to like solve this problem. So in 7 hours, they solved this, countrywide problem of locating these balloons. So, you think about use cases, finding kids, potentially locating, another weather balloon size thing that you're trying to find, right? And yeah, you could draw there are some nefarious things that you could say, like, we look at like, the Hong Kong SAR being turned over. There's some like nefarious use cases that potentially, maybe there needs to be stronger institutional protections against the location of weather balloon sized objects in place. But, so there are some hopeful things. And one of those is also an MIT adjacent thing. Actually, in February this year, they released an AI into a data set that didn't change the data set, and it went through, and artificial intelligence actually went through and was able to isolate a new antibiotic strain from existing data, and MIT just put this up. So it's kind of cool, right? So that, you know, there are some hopeful kind of things happening, but just kind of circling back to, I think there is some interesting things if you take metadata, and that's something we're looking at Chartis. Like, how do you get past the bad data, the privacy, like HIPAA compliance layer? You know, can you look at the metadata layer and then just kind of bypass it altogether? Not to mention the massive storage constraints. So some of our things that we're looking at are there ways to move past that, and then completely, you know, at the end of Moore's law, there's some interesting physics things that are going to start happening here. You know, you do, like, the wires do start to get to the nanometer, they do start to get a little too tight together, and so, like, you are starting to see, like, the physics kick in. And so how can you start to think about being not just smart in terms of privacy and protecting that against nefarious weather balloon locators, but also you know, just being smart in terms of thinking towards the future, where you are extracting new use cases, Spotify playlists based on heartbeats, whatever, but then you don't know whose heartbeat it is. You can just listen to a cool Spotify playlist, have no idea whose heartbeat it is. You know, it doesn't matter to you. So, but yeah, no, interesting thoughts all around so far.
Well, and I mean, the amount of data, right? I mean, I remember, and we all do, I'm sure, the early days of web apps, right? I mean, it was just small amounts of data, and you know, kilobytes to megabytes to then, you know, we were seeing quickly, you know, gigs to tera, and now well beyond terabytes worth of data that's going to be coming in. And, you know, I referenced IoT earlier. Think about the idea of connected sensors just in your home, right? If the average home has anywhere from, you know, 20 to 30 connected devices, including phones, just the small amount, and I say small, just the small amount of data that's coming back and forth of those, to then going to the theme that's being mentioned around personalization, and leveraging that to personalize something. Now bring in pharma and healthcare and how that plays a role into your daily life. Think about your foods, and we've talked about this before as well, and just your daily habits. I mean, my goodness, yeah, our homes, our apartments, right? 1,000 square foot apartment could be pumping enough data in and out just for the personalization of ourselves to everything we've mentioned, as a average size data center would 5 years ago. That's insane to think about. But to your point, it's what's happening. And I love the conversation around personalization, because I think it's definitely going to be here and be here to stay. And how that happens and how rapidly will change our lives forever. To Marcus's point, I mean, we're early innings, but get ready, because this is not futuristic. This is actually on its way and being worked on right now. As to Justin's point, I mean, Elvish mentioned it around healthcare. We've talked about it on pharma. We talked about it on biotech. You know, getting down to the genome level, and being able to slightly adjust how our foods are catered to each of us. Here we go. I mean, let's get to the 7th inning stretch already. Let's see this stuff happen. I love the reference, Marcus. We've got no sports right now, so thank you very much for bringing that into our lives. Steve, before I get to blockchain, I'm coming to that. I want to get to Gary. So Gary, a lot of this is all playing a role into some of the projects you're working on around artificial intelligence.
Sure.
And a lot of this data being leveraged. And I want to talk a little bit about how that plays a role in empowering our lives, as Justin just mentioned, some of these projects and how AI plays a role in that. And then Steve, I'm going to come to you next. And just to kind of tee this up, it's a big conversation we're talking about today. I'm going to come to you next around blockchain and how this distributed ledger that we all love, dear to our hearts, plays a role further in that. And we'll come to that in just a second. So Gary, how does AI play a role in all this?
Yeah, so I mean, think about, so I just want to paint a picture. So the panel members here today, you know, if you look at it, each one of us here today have 3 to 7 email accounts, right? Some you look at, some you forget. I see Steve's head shaking. So, I mean, and think about all the data repositories we have. We got Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, Slack, WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, right? 20 some, the average person has around 20 some different repositories. Now, how in the world if I send you a PowerPoint presentation, WhatsApp, and you don't check it, how do you know that that PowerPoint presentation's there? Right? So think about our own personal worlds. And I talked to you about this before, Kyle, but in 1996, the entire websites were 257,000 on the World Wide Web. Each one of us today here has over 300,000 items in their personal cloud. How many times a week do you say, I know that file exists, but I can't find it? Because I've either forgotten the key location or if I've forgotten the words. How many times has somebody said, I sent you a file, do you remember getting it? We each have the problem today. So it's 300,000 items today. In 5 years, it'll be 10 million. We need to be able to have technology that can address those issues. Actually, we have patents on that technology, a Google-like search for the personal cloud, because we are having a state of infobesity, as Ivan Toffler says. We cannot react to all the data that's coming at each one of us here today. We can't. We need to have AI to be able to help us. So imagine being able to have one site, one source to be able to go out and look for information in all your data repositories. Those are the kind of technologies that are going to really help us for the future. And right now, each one of us here are dead in the water with it because we can't find things. And it sucks. Well, do you remember that? I sent your tax return. I don't know. Did it come to Gmail? Did it come to my business account? Did you send it on Facebook Messenger? Right? And then look at all the digital treasures that we're losing every day because we can't find this stuff. And we forget. So the next stage of it is to develop a smart assistant that can go out through and start to flag the kind of things it believes are important for you. By the way, Kyle, this is where Morpheus came from. Morpheus came from our 19 patents. So we actually created a house that actually is a human-like person. It's called Morpheus. So it actually is in my partner's house, is $30+ million house. Actually has technology that moves panels, turns on TVs, does security, and has its own dog, Abby. And Abby's a robotic dog, much like Boston Dynamics, developed over in Russia, actually, and then located in Silicon Valley. And the dog is a companion, patrols, the whole 9 yards. So each one of us here have a problem with infobesity. This problem is not going to stop in the near term, and we've got to come with ways to be able to resolve it to make our lives a lot better. That's why things like machine learning and unsupervised and semi-supervised machine learning are critically important for us. We need to be able to do the data. I believe there's going to be two classes to society: the ones that have the ability to access the data and understand it, and the ones that don't. And I don't believe that that's fair. I believe we have a job, each one of us here, to level the playing field, to make life a lot better for all of us so we all can partake. Because it ain't going to be easy going forward, but it's going to be a whole lot easier if we use that machine learning and artificial intelligence to be able to help make our lives better. And we need to focus on those things. I've talked to CEOs of some of the top companies in the United States, and I've explained this exact problem about the Google-like search. And one of them said to me, this is a top, 50 tech company in the US. He said, I got a very simple solution. I said, what's that? He said, I used to delete 2 years worth of email so I wouldn't have it, so it wouldn't jam my inbox. He said, I went down to 1 year and now I'm down to 6 months. And that guy graduated from a top tier MBA program in the US, leading a top technology company. I couldn't believe it. I said, are you serious? He said, yeah, I do it across everything. That way, if somebody really wants me, they're going to have to send me something else. That's what he told me. It's crazy, right?
Wow.
So let's look at practical applications.
Absolutely agree. And when we talk about on previous episodes, also adding to this is, as you're getting excited, I wanted to bring this up: emotion, right? Emotion will play a role in this data as well. And we haven't talked yet about that. And that's kind of where AI comes in. And Rana, one of our previous guests, talked about this around behavioral analytics and emotional data, emotional AI, and how that could play a role. So Marcus, to some of the things you've mentioned as well to Elfish, is like, you've got all this data that's coming together, add emotion, add context, and a location, right? Depending on what you're doing and time of day. It's a whole new way. It's almost like duplicating yourself. You've got that self-existing digital assistant, but it's almost you, and how that reacts as well. And that, Steve, that leads me into you is around how does this play a role in blockchain and just a bigger picture of digitization, as well, as I know that's a big focus for you, and I want to make sure we get that covered, because trust and transparency is crucial to this.
Trust and transparency. Thank you. So look, I am a macro guy. ITI is an emerging market multi-asset prime broker. Naturally, I come at things from the top down, from a global perspective, and tend to sort of drill into individual use cases via investment megatrends and what's going on that way. And I've been, I'm an engineer by a long time ago, and when I sort of look at what's going on in the world now, I actually sort of see that the biggest forces at play in technology, particularly what we're doing, we're at within ITI, we obviously have our digital asset trading, but it's a relatively small part of what we do, amongst our other sort of traditional assets. And of course, those of us who have a background in emerging markets appreciate that, the geopolitical forces at work, the politics of the situation, are actually very dominant drivers of what's going on. So to give you an example, and I loved Justin's examples from DARPA earlier, but I observe that at the minute, the current trade war rhetoric, in my opinion, goes far beyond the US election that's coming up in November. I actually believe that there is an increasing risk of globalization going not quite full steam astern, but certainly there are big handbrake pressures going on. And we can see that on one aspect with the rise of protectionism, and essentially at a state level, every man for himself. And I can see that we have seen that to a degree. We have seen tasters of that with the race to devalue currencies for obvious reasons since the GFC started 12 years ago. But a very obvious application issue of what's going on today is, 2 years ago, we started to get aware of the particularly like some American voices, were vociferous about, the great Orwellian dystopian nightmare that was going on in China, where, people, of course, with the facial recognition that was driven by artificial intelligence, the fact that everybody lived their lives on a social level on WeChat, the fact that all the commerce was done on WeChat, the fact that now you've got the introduction of this social scoring system, wow, this was dreadful. We could smell the brimstone from this picture. And then, of course, lo and behold, a few months later, we were now talking about central banks digitizing their fiat currency. And of course, one of the voices, I'm not going to name any names because he's a deeply respected man and I've got huge respect for him. And because a man of great standing from American finance comes up and actually champions the case, in fact, leads the case for digitization of the US dollar, then lo and behold, a lot of those voices conveniently shut up, right? And actually, it's not such an Orwellian dystopian nightmare anymore. And if you take that line of argument sort of one step further, there is clearly an inevitability about, what's happening here globally. And all governments, of course, are waking up to, if they have not already, to the boon that is digitized fiat currencies. Why? because now it makes it easier for their inland revenues to collect their taxes, right? So that is a huge motive force, in my opinion, very much driving digitization from the state level, okay? Yeah. Then we're getting into the whole issue of the ethics around data, right? So, okay, well, how do we rationalize this, you know, Orwellian dystopian nightmare that's going on in China with actually what we're trying to do here in, you know, whatever other country we might be in. And we sort of drill into that. Well, then it comes on to the, you know, the privacy issues of the data, and can we guarantee that? And of course, that is a big whole sector of blockchain use, because now I can control who actually has my data and who doesn't. But I think the ethics of it sort of it goes beyond that, because I can see now out of this great Corona recession, every industry sector, you know, from top down level, from bottom up level, how we lead our lives. Clearly, you know, we've got impact where the kids can't go back to school anymore. We've seen, you know, in ITI, we've recently had a lot of success in a big educational ed tech business that we've been very active in placing stock. And funnily enough, it's been, you know, it hasn't required much selling at all to place these university online courses and so on. But beyond that, when I look at the ethics of the situation, we the healthcare, and you know, Alpesh earlier sort of mentioned the use case of cancer and cancer recognition, and you know, this is something of a case study, of course, in machine learning courses, because you know, a question that is often asked is, okay, so you know, would you feel comfortable, you know, having your cancer diagnosis done by machine learning rather than, you know, Dr. Steve, who's been a doctor for, you know, whatever. And it's a leading question, because it assumes that actually the person who might be making your diagnosis, might be reading your, you know, your scans, whatever, is actually a qualified person with all that sort of assumed background and expertise that perhaps, you know, we could take for granted last year. So the ethics of the situation, and my answer to that question is very clearly yes. I actually would have more confidence in the machine learning. Obviously, we need to supplement the two. And now we're
humans make mistakes right now. I mean, that's the thing, right? We are due to error. Not that data and learning models are not, but right now we are. And I just want to let you finish that quick point, because we're coming up to the top of the hour, so we do need to wrap up, but want to make sure you get a chance to finish that as well.
Sure. And look, the ethics for me are, again, with this whole sort of Corona thing, we look at this use case in the UK where there was clearly a reluctance for people in the UK to sign up to this Corona tracking device. And why? Yeah. Because I feel people now with this great information technology are aware of the value of their personal data. And they're also aware of the very real commercial downside of when perhaps their government might sell that data to US insurance companies. So I think the debate is being forced into the open. And I think there are very real sort of carrot and stick drivers around that. So
and I absolutely agree. And I'm so sorry we don't have enough time to unpack that, because there is a very big topic to be had and discussion to be had there. And we've talked a little bit about it on other episodes, because while people understand that, including us, the question is, are we ready to take ownership of that? Are we ready to monetize it? Are we ready to switch those levers on and off of who has control and who doesn't? And we may not, and we may in some cases. And I think that's a very big, and another episode of VCTV, shameless plug, but that is another big conversation. We definitely need to have everyone back here for a round 2, because it goes too deep. So gentlemen, we are at the top of the hour. I want to make sure everyone gets their closing thoughts in, and also lets everyone, our audience, know where they can find you online. So Elfish, let's start with you. Quick closing thoughts. We've got 7 of us to get through. So quick closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you online?
I'm at Alpesh Doshi on Twitter, Alpesh Doshi on LinkedIn. You just type my name and you'll find me. Interestingly, there's another guy who is a gynecologist with the same name as me. So, you know, you might find him as me. So
I found him
he's
on
very
Twitter.
famous.
I almost tagged him incorrectly. So
He's very famous. But final thoughts for me. Look, I mean, we all know we're all in the space. It's amazing how, given the experience we've had in data, that we're still at the beginning of the transformation. The difference now is we're seeing a better adoption. We're seeing better adoption. That's the main thing. People are now thinking about it. They know it's table stakes for their business if they don't figure out how to use data. From a personal data perspective, similarly, because of Cambridge Analytica and other things, people are saying it's valuable. But the challenge is, how do you make it easy for the consumer just to give permission and handle everything for them? They're not going to want to faff around, yes, I'm going to give permissions all the time. They want it easy and they want to control it, but they want it, yes, if they can monetize it, they would. But so for me, the user experience on how data manifests itself for business value, whether it's consumer or business, is one of the biggest parts of this.
absolutely agree. And guys, I apologize. We are about out of time, so we won't have much time for closing thoughts. So I'm going to come around where everyone can find each of you. So thank you guys all again for all of these brilliant insights. We definitely have to have a round 2 of this discussion. We could go for another 2 hours. This is absolutely wonderful. Gary, where can everyone find you online?
Yeah, sure. You can find me, Gary Fowler, on LinkedIn, Gary at GSDVS, and our website is gsdvs.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Steve.
Hi. So I'm Stephen Kelso, Stephen with a PH on LinkedIn, KELSO, and it's steve.kelso@iticapital.com. Should be on Google.
Perfect. Justin.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. It's charge.vc. We're always interested in talking to people who are working in the space, so definitely reach out if you are building something. And great talking to you guys.
Petros.
Yeah, I think with most people, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me there. Always keen to talk with people with interesting ideas and looking to revolutionize an industry.
Wonderful. Marcus, close us out. Where can everyone find you?
All right, so thank you, everybody. You can find me from just profina.com. Markets@profina.com is my email. And I would definitely welcome people that are building new types of apps and conversations around those.
Wonderful. Again, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining and sharing your insights today. This could go for another 2 hours. We're going to have you all back for a part 2 and maybe even a part 3, as Stephen teed up a very big topic for us. And we didn't even get a chance to geek out with Petros and Marcus, but we will be back with everybody here soon, hopefully. And to your audience, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, make sure you click the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. We're all available on social media, as mentioned. So do reach out. We'd love to hear from you, hear insights, and what else we can do here at VCTV. Additional conversations, topics, how you can get involved as well. Thank you, Elena, and the entire LATOKEN team for allowing VCTV to happen every day and come to your screen everywhere around the world. I'm Kyle Ellicott, your host. You can find me online everywhere at Kyle Ellicott. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.